Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, if you've come here looking for a shortcut to some really deep knowledge, well, today you're definitely getting the ultimate fast track. We're diving into some seriously mind-bending philosophy.
Mhm.
We are basically leaving the boundaries of, everyday human experience way behind us today. We're venturing into a realm that, let's be honest, our brains aren't really wired to handle easily.
That's putting it mildly. Yeah, we're moving completely out of the realm of anything measurable. We're leaving cause and effect, sequence, all that behind. And we're diving headfirst into concepts that, well, they challenge the fundamental limits of our own existence. Today's deep dive is highly theological, very philosophical.
It really is. Our
Yeah.
source material today focuses on understanding the nature of the eternal God, which in the text we looked at is often called Kidada, and his relationship, or maybe it's better to say the nature of his radical transcendence over the things that define our reality. You know, time, space, existence, even non-existence.
Right. And this isn't about like general worship practices or something. It's much more specific. It's about trying to define God's attributes in an almost philosophical or even scientific way based on these texts.
Exactly. And the sources we're using draw really heavily on specific biblical texts. You mentioned Ephesians, Psalms, Isaiah, Jeremiah, quite a few others, to do just that,
Yeah.
define these attributes. And I guess the central tension we're exploring is this absolute unbridgeable distinction between the creator and everything created.
Whether that created being is an angel,
Yeah.
sources use the term you or human,
Yeah.
ger. We kind of have to understand their limits, our limits, to even begin to appreciate his boundlessness.
Okay, so our mission statement for you, the listener, is pretty simple today. This deep dive is your shortcut to grappling with concepts that we, as creatures stuck in space-time, are almost fundamentally incapable of grasping through just logic alone. We're unpacking the ultimate paradoxes, like the idea that for the creator, the past, the present, and the future, they're all experienced simultaneously as something we can only really call always now.
It's a big one.
Yeah. So prepare for some serious mental gymnastics. Let's start before the beginning, shall we?
All right, so we start with this concept of the divine blueprint. The source material lays down a pretty foundational claim right away.
Wow.
That God's purpose, what the texts call the hidden plan, or the... Ooh,
Which means something like the secret administration or blueprint.
exactly, it's a good way to put it. This blueprint was hidden in God, the one who created all things from eternity.
Okay, from eternity. That sounds simple, but the implication there is just staggering. When we say from eternity, we mean before space existed, before time started ticking, before matter, before anything we could possibly recognize as being.
Right.
So what does it even mean for a plan to be hidden in God during that pre-state?
Well, it completely eliminates any idea of God, sort of,
Yeah.
reacting to events as they happen. Before the very first photon, the first particle of light even existed, the entire scope of the reality that would follow, space-time, its entire history, all its events, its crises, its final outcome, was already determined.
Already locked in.
Already locked in. God had already, the term used is Chenya, he had fixed his will, internally, irrevocably, for everything that would happen within that new reality he was about to create.
Okay, but that suggests a level of predetermination that's incredibly hard for us to square with our own experience, right? Our feeling of making choices, of things being open. If the blueprint was totally fixed from eternity, why even go through the whole process? Creation, history, why not just, poof, manifest the end state?
That's exactly the tension the sources get into. The plan was hidden, the idea goes, because revealing it required a sequential process. It took time unfolding to show the full scope of God's glory and wisdom. Ephesians 3:9 talks about this. The purpose was eventually to make known the plan that had been hidden in God. It's like a retroactive revelation of a design that was already complete before anything started.
So the unfolding drama, our history, is actually the method God uses to show the blueprint to created beings, like us and angels, demonstrating things like patience, justice, love, through actual events, not just saying, I am patient.
Precisely. It's showing, not just telling. And the sources tie this radical predetermination directly to salvation, too. We often think of grace as this generous thing God does after we mess up or ask for help.
Yeah, like a response.
Like a response. But then there's 2 Timothy 1:9, which gets quoted, reminding us that the grace given to those who are saved was actually decided before time began. The phrase is, in Christ Jesus.
Before time began. That is huge. It means the whole cast list, basically. Who would be called? Who would get this grace, the saved? That wasn't some hopeful guess God made, or even a reaction to seeing who would have faith later on.
According to these sources, no. It was a fixed, known quantity, known by the Father before creation even kicked off. He knew the final score before the game even started, so to speak.
Okay, but that immediately brings up the big question, the one our human minds just scream out. If God knew before time who is going to be saved, where does our free will fit in? Doesn't that just make us puppets?
Right, the classic dilemma. The sources essentially argue that this feels like a paradox to us because of our temporal limitations. We're stuck in sequence. But because God is outside of time.
He's not bound by before and after.
Exactly. So his foreknowledge doesn't cause the event in the way, say, one billiard ball hitting another causes it to move. Our free will is presented as real within our frame, within space-time. But for the transcendent God, our choice from the moment we make it to his consequences is simply known because he sees our entire timeline all at once.
So the eternal plan and our temporal choices, they coexist, even if we can't logically mash them together perfectly in our heads.
That seems to be the position, yes.
Yeah.
It's a reality that exists at God's level, even if it strains our comprehension.
Okay. That actually leads us perfectly into this really critical distinction the source makes about time itself. This might be the biggest conceptual hurdle we need to get over today.
It really is key. We have to move past the common idea of eternity. The sources are emphatic about this. God's eternity is not just the infinite extension of time. It's not Gucci.
Right. When we think eternity, we usually picture a timeline just stretching forever, forward and backward.
An endless supply of seconds, minutes, years, just more and more sequence.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what these sources reject. The argument is, look, if God's eternity was just infinitely long time, that would mean God is still subject to time. He'd be bound by its flow, its limitations. The Korean phrase captures it.
Yeah.
You you. He'd be limited by time.
Okay, yeah. If God was governed by sequence, then even for him, there'd be a before when something hadn't happened yet and an after when it has.
Right.
And that seems to mess with the whole idea of omnipotence, omniscience, because it implies even God doesn't know or control what's coming in the very next instant. He'd be waiting for it, like us.
Precisely. If things happen sequentially for God, he couldn't really govern the past or the future as his present domain. He'd be stuck in the cosmic now, just like we are, only maybe for longer.
Which he isn't.
Which he isn't, according to this. Therefore, the central defining point the source material hammers home is that time itself. It's merely a creature.
Time is a creature, like a thing God made.
Exactly. It's something created, something sustained, something governed. It's a system he built, not a box. He lives inside.
Okay, so if time is a creature, then the creator must be outside of it, observing it, governing all of it, not just being swept along by its current.
Necessarily.
This shifts things from thinking about forever in a line to thinking about being outside of time altogether, atemporal.
Think of it maybe like this. You have a novel. It exists from page 1 to the end. For the characters inside the novel, their lives unfold chapter by chapter sequentially.
Right. Yeah, they experience it moment by moment.
But the author exists outside the novel. The author's existence isn't just an infinitely long extension of the novel's timeline. The author's time, or rather the author's mode of being, is completely different.
Ah, I see. So time, for God, isn't the room he's in, it's an object he's holding.
That's a great way to put it. Existing eternally in sequence is not the same thing as existing outside of sequence in a state of a temporal eternity.
Yeah.
It's a different quality of existence.
Okay, that helps make the jump from sequential time to a temporal eternity a bit more graspable. But the scale is still just paramus.
Wow. So if God exists outside of time, how does he actually interact with it? This gets us into that radical paradox of transcendence, right? Moving from the blueprint to just the sheer scale of, well, everything. Right. So the source says that God always sustains infinity. The word is ioi and eo. He's always keeping it in existence. Now, we throw around the word infinity pretty loosely.
Yeah, like just really big.
Right. But here, it seems to mean the absolute totality of potential, space, time, and maybe even things beyond what we can conceive. And this infinity isn't static. It requires continuous, active, divine maintenance.
Wow. Okay, so our space-time, this reality we live in, it's just existing within that larger infinity that God is constantly holding up.
That's the picture presented. Think about it. Our physical universe, with billions of galaxies, is already mind-bogglingly vast to us.
Unimaginably huge.
But even that entire enormous structure is just contained within this broader infinity that God actively sustains. The whole physical realm is like a nested doll inside something vastly greater.
Okay, and this leads to, what did the source say? A really radical implication.
It does, because God sustains this total infinity, and our space-time is just this temporary created structure inside it. The source material suggests that God regards our space-time as if it were nothing.
Okay, hang on, let's pause there. Because that's the kind of statement that could easily make someone feel like, well, what's the point? Nihilism, right? If God sees our reality where we live, love, suffer as if it's nothing, how do we stop that from just minimizing everything we experience?
That's the crucial cognitive gap we have to acknowledge, and the source does too. It explicitly clarifies. For us, space-time is real. It is real to us. Our experiences within it are absolutely defining for us.
Okay, our suffering is real to us. Our joy is real to us.
Definitely. But whether this whole structure qualifies as real existence, the word used is on to the one who sustains infinity, that's something we creatures simply cannot know. God's perspective is absolute, and from that absolute viewpoint, our entire universe isn't essential to his being in the way his own self-existence is.
Ah, okay. It's like the difference between something foundational, something that has to be, versus something projected or constructed. It doesn't mean our pain isn't real to us, but it means the whole stage our pain plays out on is temporary to him.
Exactly. The source is quite firm.
Yeah.
We cannot know if our space-time structure is eternal or permanent or even truly real in the same way God is real. For God, this entire system is sustained moment by moment, purely by his will. It's like, imagine a sand mandala. Incredibly real, intricate, beautiful to those looking at it.
Yeah.
But to the monk who made it, it's still just sand. Temporary, waiting to be swept away when its purpose is done.
That's a powerful analogy. Okay, let's shift then to this core idea of simultaneity and omnipresence. This is where that always now idea really takes shape, right? The sources use Jeremiah 23, God being nearby and afar off, to stress he's simultaneously present everywhere in space and everywhere in time.
Yeah, that's it. That's the unification of omnipresence. We kind of get spatial omnipresence, God being everywhere here and on the other side of the universe right now.
Yeah, that's more intuitive somehow.
But temporal omnipresence means he doesn't just fill all of now, he fills all of when. Every single point on the timeline, past, present, future, is simultaneously saturated with his being.
Whoa, okay, so for the eternal God, the building of the pyramids, the conversation we're having right now, the heat death of the universe billions of years from now, it's all being experienced by him as one continuous, observable, simultaneous reality.
That's the concept. It's all always now. The Korean phrase used is "Hinuska," perhaps it's always now.
Which means no surprises for God, ever. No waiting. When we pray about something happening next week, God isn't waiting until next week to see what happens. He's already there observing the outcome because next week is already now for him.
Exactly. There's no historical unfolding for him. He perceives the totality at once.
And that's where Psalm 90.4 comes in, right? That illustration. 1,000 years in God's sight is like, oh, what? Yesterday when it's past and a watch in the night. It's not just that time moves fast for God. It's that huge stretches of our time collapse into a single point for him.
Right. It's about temporal compression, or maybe transcending is a better word. It's like looking at the entire plot of a movie instantly by looking at the whole film reel.
Okay, the film reel analogy helps. But you said we need to critique it.
Yeah, because even a film reel is still a physical thing, right? It has a sequence. The source material suggests God isn't just observing a pre-recorded sequence. He's actively sustaining the existence of every single frame of reality at the same time.
Ah, okay. It's active, not passive.
Very active. Isaiah 48.13 is referenced. When I call to them heavens and earth, they stand forth together. Oiki, yonde. It implies an instantaneous, continuous, simultaneous upholding of all moments.
This inherent difference really throws that contrast into sharp relief, doesn't it? Between the creator and us, the created, which, for the learner, this is the key aha moment, I think. We created beings, whether we're angels or humans, exist only in space-time, on JG, where the characters stuck in the story's flow.
And our limitations are profound because of that. Our consciousness is sequential. We experience one moment after another. We can't go back to the past. We can't leap into the future. We can't be in London and Tokyo at the same instant. Our entire reality is defined by this linear movement through time.
And the source actually uses that limitation, our limitation, as proof for why God must transcend time.
Exactly. It's a logical argument. If God couldn't transcend space-time, if he were just, say, an infinitely old being but still within time, then he'd be trapped in the present moment just like us.
I was thinking the roots, they were just eligo, way eligo.
Now signs unread. And if he were trapped in the present, think about it. The past would genuinely be gone for him too, just a memory. The future would be truly unknown, just potential outcomes he might hope for, but couldn't actually govern yet.
Right. He wouldn't be lord over past and future.
He wouldn't. And the source argues if the past and future weren't his domain to actively govern right now, then space-time wouldn't truly be his creation in the fullest sense. And he wouldn't truly be the sovereign creator. But since the foundational claim is that he is the creator,
Then he must transcend time. His nature demands it.
it becomes a logical necessity. The fact that he's creator proves he transcends the sequence he created. Therefore, past, present, and future are all his domain,
Yeah.
all simultaneously present, all now.
Wow. Okay. The creator of sequence can't be defined by the sequence he made. That makes sense. It's still mind-bending, but it's logical.
All right, moving forward. If you thought temporal transcendence was tricky, the source challenges our perception of reality even more now. It builds on God's absolute ownership and introduces a concept that's maybe even harder to grasp: the mystery of non-existence. The term used is Jenan.
Non-existence.
Go.
Okay, for us, that's just nothing, right? The absence of something. If something is non-existent, it's just not there. It has no power, no potential. It's just gone.
Yeah.
That's our limited, creaturely perspective. But the source suggests something radically different. For God, non-existence isn't just nothing. It's actually always present within him.
Wait. Non-existence is present within God. How can nothing be something that's present?
It redefines nothing. Think of it less as an empty void outside of God and more like a boundless sea of potentiality contained within his being. Everything that could exist but doesn't yet exist in our space-time frame. It's held within God as potential.
Okay, so non-existence isn't emptiness. It's untapped potential, held within the ultimate reality, which is God. That's the idea. It shifts the whole definition. So when God commands, non-existence becomes existence. So this is basically the definition of creation, ex nihilo, creation out of nothing.
Right.
But that nothing isn't absolute nothingness. It's this potential held within the creator.
Yeah.
You know, Hebrews 11.3 says things that are seen were not made out of things that are visible. The visible comes from this non-existent potential within God.
Okay. And the flip side. The source says existence can also become non-existence again.
Oh.
That way, Quan, if God commands it, yes. So our reality, this existence we experience, is just the specific temporary subset of all that potentiality that God chose to manifest, to bring out of non-existence into this structure we call space-time.
Which leads to this idea of ultimate ownership,
Yeah.
God owning everything.
Everything. The source stresses this. Existence, non-existence, things that could exist in our universe but don't, things that couldn't even logically exist in our universe. It's all God's. That's ownership on an absolute scale. Not just owning the stars and planets, but owning the potential for things that never were. Owning the laws of physics that might have been but weren't chosen.
Owning the very concepts of is and is not. And because it's all his, God disposes of it all according to his will. And here's the kicker. We, as creatures, cannot impose our definitions of reality onto God. The source is really clear. We cannot truly know how God views existence or non-existence from his perspective. Okay, this makes the idea of something being lost or gone really interesting. If God views non-existence as this ever-present potential within him, then things that disappear from our time, things that were real to us but are now gone, they aren't actually lost to God.
From his perspective, maybe not. They've simply shifted state. They've returned from manifested existence back into that sea of potential held permanently in God. For us, it was an ending. For God, maybe just a change in status, a reabsorption into potential. Because he's always sustaining infinity, he could theoretically just call it back if he wanted to.
The potential never truly vanishes from the ultimate reality, which is him. That seems to be the implication.
It's just. The scale of this is immense. And it's interesting that the sources point out even angels don't fully grasp this. We tend to think of angels as having the inside scoop on everything divine.
Right. But the sources remind us that even angels know relatively little, Liucha Jajavaiwei. They're still learning too. Which brings us to this really fascinating paradox mentioned in Ephesians 3.0 and also 1 Peter 1.2.
Ah, this is where the church comes in, isn't it? God uses the church, us redeemed humans, to actually teach the angels.
That sounds incredible, but that's what it says. God uses the church to reveal his multifaceted wisdom to the principalities and powers in the heavenly realms. Our little temporary reality, our struggles and redemption within space-time, is somehow the primary textbook for the celestial hierarchy.
Talk about an inversion. Angels who aren't stuck in physical bodies like us, who've seen maybe millennia of God's work, they are looking at us to understand God's plan.
Apparently so.
Uh,
1 Peter says these are things angels desire to look into, OTUs. Hokijiki.
yeah.
They're watching the drama of salvation unfold down here within time to fully grasp the depths of that plan that was hidden from eternity.
So the big reveal of the blueprint isn't like a lecture God gives the angels. It's delivered through the messy, real, sequential story of human history and redemption. Our existence in this seemingly trivial space-time is actually the classroom for the cosmos. That puts a whole different spin on the importance of what happens here, doesn't it? Even if it's temporary from God's view.
It really does. It gives profound meaning to the unfolding narrative, despite its temporal nature. Okay, so now we pivot a bit. We've looked at God's relationship to creation, his transcendence over it. Now the sources shift focus inward to God's essential, necessary nature. Isaiah 40.28 is key here, establishing that the eternal God cannot be flawed.
Right, the verse says, he does not faint or grow weary. He's never tired. Really? And his understanding is limitless. Adieu.
Exactly. And this isn't just presented as a nice theological attribute, like saying he's kind. The sources argue his perfection, specifically his inability to fail or make mistakes, is actually a logical necessity. It's a precondition for reality itself to even hold together.
A logical necessity. Okay, unpack that. Why can't God make mistakes, according to this logic?
The source lays out basically 3 cascading consequences, like dominoes falling, if God were to make even one mistake.
Okay, domino 1. What falls first if God messes up?
The immediate collapse of justice and trust. If God makes a fundamental error, his justice in Shelley, his Joan is instantly broken. A mistake implies, a flaw in judgment or in carrying something out. If the ultimate governor of reality makes a mistake,
Then the whole system is unreliable, creatures couldn't trust it.
Precisely. And if that trust disappears, what happens to free will? The source argues the completion of free will, again, becomes impossible.
How so?
Well, think about it. If the reality you live in, the rules, the consequences, are governed by someone who might be wrong, who might make mistakes, how can you rationally choose your ultimate moral path? The foundation you need to rely on God's perfect, infallible judgment would be shaky.
So the structure of moral reality itself would crumble because the ultimate authority is flawed and unpredictable.
That's the argument. The creation could never reach its intended perfect state because the basis for trust and rational choice would be gone.
Okay, that makes a kind of legal or moral sense. What's the second domino? This one connects back to the transcendence we were just talking about, right? The problem of consistency across time.
Exactly. This is where that always now concept becomes absolutely critical again. Remember, God is simultaneously present in all moments, past, present, future.
Right, all moments are now for him.
So if God were incomplete or made a mistake in even one single instant of time, say something went wrong in 500 BC from our perspective, that mistake wouldn't just be a past event for him. It would exist eternally within his simultaneous perception.
Whoa. So a mistake isn't just a historical blip. It's a permanent feature of his now. If he was flawed for a microsecond, that flaw is always present in his being.
That's the logic. If there's even one moment where he isn't perfectly omnipotent or perfectly wise, then he is, by necessity, never perfectly omnipotent or wise, because that moment of weakness or error is perpetually sustained within his simultaneous reality.
So his transcendence actually demands continuous, unbroken perfection across all of time. An error isn't something he could just fix later, because there is no later for him in the same way there is for us. All moments exist together.
Precisely. The stability of our sequential reality, the argument goes, depends entirely on the non-sequential, unwavering perfection of the Creator. A single error would be an eternal flaw, fundamentally destabilizing everything.
That is incredibly powerful. Okay, domino 3. This one was called the love paradox. If an omnipotent, simultaneously existing being did somehow make a mistake, the source argues it couldn't have been an accident.
This is the real logical bind. The source claims it must have been intentional. Yeah, gains. Yeah,
Right.
intentional. Because an omniscient being, one who knows the exact outcome of every possible action across all time simultaneously, can't accidentally introduce an imperfection. If he knows exactly what will happen if he does X, and he still does X, and X leads to a flaw or a mistake entering the system.
Then he chose that outcome. He knew it would happen and allowed it, or did it anyway.
Exactly. It wasn't an oops. And if he intentionally introduced destructive imperfection, things like sin, death, suffering, into his creation when he had the infinite knowledge and power to design it perfectly without them.
Then he's contradicting his own nature, which the sources define fundamentally as love.
Right. An intentional introduction of sin and death, when it could have been avoided by a perfect being, would break his identity as ultimate love. It would seem malicious, or at least not perfectly loving.
So the conclusion is, God can't be omnipotent, omniscient, existing in all moments simultaneously, and make an unintentional mistake. If a mistake happened, it implies it was deliberate, which means he isn't love, since the core assertion is that he is love and is omnipotent.
Then the only possibility left is that he is infallible. He never errs. Perfection, love, and omnipotence become locked together. They're mutually dependent attributes in this framework. It's presented as an airtight logical necessity.
Okay, I have to push back slightly here, just for the listener who might be thinking. If God is perfectly infallible, why does creation look so flawed? Why is there sin and death? If he never makes mistakes, why does the world seem full of them?
That's the crucial distinction the sources imply. The flaw is seen as being in the created system, specifically arising from creaturely free will within that system, not in the creator's overarching design or zello, his permission for that system to play out. The potential for failure, which manifests as sin and death, was, according to this view, a deliberate part of that hidden blueprint we talked about earlier.
So allowing the possibility of sin wasn't a mistake. It was part of the plan, maybe necessary to eventually show his wisdom, his grace, his justice.
That seems to be the implication. The plan itself is held to be perfect. The creature's choices within the plan introduce the imperfection. But even that imperfection is contained, governed, and ultimately dealt with by the perfect plan. God's allowance of it wasn't an error, but a foreseen, permitted element.
Which brings us back to his consistency. Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever.
Exactly. God cannot fundamentally change his essence. He can't stop being love or stop being just or omnipotent or complete. He is always consistent, yeah. While we change constantly because we're bound by time, the unchanging, simultaneous nature of the Creator is what provides the absolute stability underneath everything. It stops our whole reality from just dissolving into chaos.
All right. So armed with this understanding, God is transcendent. He owns existence and non-existence. He's infallible. We can now try to approach his ultimate perspective on the things that really dominate our human experience, namely sin and death. And this is where the source material gets pretty provocative.
Yeah, it's essential to remember the context here. This is attempting to describe God's view from outside spacetime, from that position of sustaining infinity. From that vantage point, sin and death, which loom so large for us, they define so much of our lives and history, are considered trivial things.
And the language used is intentionally jarring, isn't it? The source compares sin and death to things like bacteria or bits of feces. That's strong language.
It is extremely strong,
Yeah.
and the shock value seems deliberate. It serves a conceptual purpose, to drastically reframe their ontological status, to say, from God's absolute perspective, these things that seem so powerful to us are actually insignificant contaminants.
Why? Because they aren't fundamental reality.
Because they are merely creatures. In the sense that they are created, permitted phenomena, their existence is sustained by God Cho and Yahweh. They only exist because God, for his own purposes within the blueprint, chose to call them forth from non-existence or permit them to arise, and he sustains them temporarily within the space-time framework.
Okay, so sin and death have no independent power of their own. They're just dependent phenomena allowed for a time. But if God views them as trivial, even repulsive, why sustain them at all? That seems contradictory.
The source implies it's a deliberate, governed permission. It's not that God approves of sin or death within the moral structure he created for us in space-time. He clearly doesn't. But from his infinite perspective, outside that structure, he merely sustains these entities because they serve a temporary purpose within his fixed, perfect blueprint.
Like necessary contrast. To highlight holiness, demonstrate redemption, maybe?
That seems to be the line of reasoning. They're like the temporary, unpleasant byproducts of a necessary process. They are part of the system. He's running, but they pose zero threat to him, the eternal server running the program. They're just data points he's managing until the program concludes.
Okay, let's try applying that always now concept to the ultimate fate of evil. Specifically, the source mentions the judgment of Satan. For us, that's future, right? We see a sequence,
Yeah.
Lucifer or Heliel before the fall.
Yeah.
Then he becomes Satan, operates through history, then eventually he's judged, cast into the lake of fire, and the source says he ultimately returns to non-existence.
Trussenkruckers. That's our sequential view. Exactly, stretching over potentially vast ages. But for God, who exists in all moments now, that entire sequence is simultaneous. The judgment isn't future, it's current.
So right now, in God's now, he is simultaneously observing Heliel before the fall, and watching Satan doing his thing throughout history, and watching Satan's final judgment in the lake of fire, and watching his ultimate return to non-existence.
All at once. There's no waiting for the story to play out. The beginning, middle, and end are all co-present in his perception.
Wow. Okay, that is the final, really profound aha moment, isn't it? God views the entire lifespan of evil, from its inception to its final annihilation, as one single completed frame. A reality he has already sustained, judged, and concluded in his eternal perspective.
And because he has this complete foreknowledge, this simultaneous governance, the source suggests something really powerful about how he might view those destined for judgment, even while they're still walking around in our timeline.
What's that?
We see them as alive, right, existing now. But God, already perceiving their final end, their removal from existence, their return to non-existence, might, in his perspective, already regard them as dead. Kanor Soryanja. He doesn't need to wait for the end of their physical life or the final judgment to know their ultimate state. Their fate is already a settled, current fact in his always now.
Their biological life versus their ultimate state might be a distinction that's only meaningful within our temporal frame, not necessarily in his eternal one, where the conclusion is already perceived.
This really hammers home that hierarchy of being the sources talked about. God alone is the true existence, meaning he's the only reality that must exist, the only one not dependent on anything else for his being.
The self-existent, Sigmas Canonon.
Absolutely. Whereas space-time, our whole universe, it cannot exist independently. Sa Shena. And the source is specific. Space-time is not part of God's essential makeup. It's external to his being, even though it's held within the sphere of his power and sustained by him.
Okay. Before we wrap up, there was one more kind of complex theological point. A nuance about the second person of God, the Son Dieu, and how he relates to space-time.
Yes, a critical nuance to explain God's interaction within this temporary reality he created. The source offers a structural idea that space-time exists within the second person of God.
Contained within him.
In some sense, yes, and it outlines the timeline as we perceive it. The second person, the Son, came as a creature, you, only a creature within space-time, specifically to enter our reality and extinguish sin and death from within it.
So it was a deliberate act of condescension, self-limitation. The eternal Son who contains space-time, willingly accepting the limits of a creature inside space-time to fix the problems of space-time.
That's the picture. The ultimate act of contained humility, stepping into the sequential frame he created.
And then what happens after?
The source points towards a future transition, prophetically, where the Father becomes the totality or permeates all of space-time, and the second person returns to his state of full equality with the Father. Although the source immediately clarifies that this return is more about manifestation or role, because the Son is always eternally equal with the Father. His taking on a created nature was purely temporary, purely functional for the mission he undertook within our time-bound reality.
So another paradox. Eternal equality yet temporary necessary subordination within the created frame to achieve the plan. It just reinforces that the eternal God operates on levels that constantly break our simple, either time-based logic.
Consistently. Yes. #outro. So let's try to synthesize this a bit. What we've really uncovered today is that we exist in this tiny self-contained frame, defined by time, space, existence as we know it, but everything we perceive as solid, as definitive, the past being gone, the future being unknown, non-existence being nothing, even the reality of our universe, it's all utterly fluid, utterly contingent from the perspective of the eternal God.
Yeah, he sustains the infinite, and from that vantage point, our temporary structures, our entire space-time, might be viewed, as the source said, as if it were nothing.
And we established that his perfection isn't just a nice idea. It's argued as a non-negotiable logical necessity for reality itself to even exist. If you were flawed at any point, he he'd be flawed eternally, simultaneously.
And his transcendence means he sees the whole sweep of history from creation to final judgment as one single, seamless, simultaneous now. We're creatures living in sequence, but governed by the God of simultaneity.
Ultimately, our minds just hit a wall, don't they? Being bound to sequence, we can't fully grasp a temporal eternity. We only know the limited slice that God chooses to reveal to us, often through this unfolding drama within time, like we discussed with the angels learning from the church.
Right. Which brings us to a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on as you leave this deep dive. Given everything we've talked about, the sheer scale of the eternal God, his ability to call anything into existence or command it back into non-existence at any moment, the idea that both existence and non-existence are always present in him.
Right.
What does that do to how we should think about the really persistent, powerful realities in our own lives?
Yeah, think specifically about the things that cause us the most suffering, or mortality itself, or the biggest sources of sin and anguish we wrestle with day to day. If God, from his eternal perspective, views these things as merely things he is sustaining temporarily, or, using that stark language from the source, is trivial things, almost like cosmic waste products.
Like bits of feces.
Right.
Right.
What is that perspective, if we can even glimpse it, do to our own sense of how permanent or powerful those negative things really are? How much ultimate threat do they pose?
If the only thing that truly must exist, the only true existence, is God himself, maybe the things that cause us the most pain and fear are just temporary, permitted, contained within that massive predetermined framework that, in God's sight, is already always now finished.
Maybe they aren't the ultimate fixtures we often feel they are. Maybe they're just sustained phenomena, awaiting the command to return to non-existence when their purpose in the blueprint is complete.
Something to think about.
Definitely. We'll leave you there. Until next time.